Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. The UK Labour government says it will end automatic benefits for asylum seekers as part of a push to cut irregular migration. The Interior Ministry says the overhaul will follow Denmark's strict immigration model. China says its Coast Guard has patrolled waters around the Japan-controlled Senkaku Islands amid soaring tensions over Tokyo's Taiwan comments. Beijing insists the islands are its own territory as tensions between Tokyo and Beijing rise. Russia says its forces have seized 2 more villages in the Zaporozhye region. This comes as Moscow continues slow advances against outnumbered Ukrainian troops as it pushes to capture further territory in the Donetsk region. President Zelensky says Ukraine is working to resume prisoner exchanges with Russia, seeking to return of around 1,200 Ukrainians. Security Chief Rostem Umerov says talks have been held in Turkey and the UAE with support from allies. Israeli Minister Gideon Saar says Israel will not agree to the establishment of what he calls a Palestinian terror state. Meanwhile, the IDF says its forces shot and killed a Palestinian man during an overnight clash in the West Bank. Voting has begun in Chile's general elections, dominated by debates on crime and immigration that have boosted far-right iron fist campaigns. Results are expected within hours after polls close later today. At least 120 people, mostly police, were injured as thousands protested President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico City. Clashes erupted when hooded youths threw projectiles, prompting police to respond. Authorities say 20 people were arrested. Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri says Hezbollah has the right to rebuild itself and hasn't fired a shot since last year's ceasefire. He accuses Israel of violating the deal while denying any weapons smuggling into Lebanon. We start in Europe this hour, and the Russian army said it has captured 2 additional villages in southern Ukraine as its forces continue to make gradual advances against what it describes as outnumbered Ukrainian troops. In a statement, Russia's Ministry of Defense has announced that it has taken control of the villages of Ripnopilia and Malakomchaka in the Zaporozhye region. Ukrainian officials have not immediately confirmed the claims, which come as heavy fighting continues across the southern front line. Joining us now is Major General R.G.G. Davidi. He's an international relations and defence expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General Davidi, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Could you tell us the strategic importance of these military gains in the Donetsk region, of course a region which Russia wants to capture the entirety of?
Well, Thomas, the fighting that is going on between Russia and Ukraine is on 2 planes. One is the aerial warfare, and aerial warfare, the Russians are primarily targeting the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And as far as the ground operations are concerned, these operations are tactical in nature. They are small-scale operations, but each inch of ground that is gained gives you a tactical advantage. And currently, the fighting that is going on in Zaporozhye region, you talked about Rivnopila and also Malakomchaka. Now, these are the small villages, and once you get hold of the villages, you gain certain amount of territory. But the major fighting is in the northern area, that is the Pokrovsk area, which I think has been the scene of fighting since the last couple of months. And it's here that major gains will be made because Russians are at advantage. They have been able to infiltrate this, town, and it's a rather biggish town, about 60,000 population, but now it is deserted. It's a major communication center. And in case they gain here, then they will gain a fairly major tactical advantage. The point is that these ground fighting, now the winters are setting in, they are small scale operation, But the Russian, army or President Putin feels that every small gain gives them an advantage at the negotiation table. But nonetheless, I wish to make 2 points. Firstly, such fighting is very expensive in terms of human life and equipment. And secondly, Ukrainians are at disadvantage because Russian forces have a numerical advantage as well as advantage in terms of weapons and equipment. Thomas.
Yes, of course, and Major General Gigi Davidi, of course, as the saying goes, the first casualty in war is the truth. We have differing statistics coming out of the front line. How does one go about navigating the information coming out of the eastern front of Ukraine right now?
Well, when you talk about the casualties in the war, firstly, attacker always suffer more casualties than defender. In this case, the Russians are on the aggressive and they bound to suffer more casualties than the defender because defender well prepared. And the second point is, it's very difficult to get to know what exactly casualties are, but when you are in face-to-face fighting or when you're in the close quarter battle fighting, the casualties are generally very high, and that's my own experience having been a veteran of number of wars. That when troops are fighting very close, then the casualties tend to be very high because close quarter battle is in fact a bloody battle and where the casualties are generally very high. So all I can say is that aggressor suffers more, and in this case the Russians are more on the aggressive mode and they were bound to take more casualties. And then their figures, the Russians have taken almost 200,000 casualties in this war that has been on since February 2022. Thomas.
Yes, Major General G.D. Davidi, thank you very much for joining us here on News Expert. It's always a pleasure to get your insight, and thank you very much for taking the time. We now move over to West Asia for our next story. And according to reports from both the Israeli army and the Palestinian Health Ministry, Israel has killed a Palestinian teenager during an overnight Israeli operation in the Askar refugee camp in Nablus. The Israeli military says its reserve forces were conducting an operation when a Palestinian allegedly threw an explosive device at soldiers, prompting them to return fire and kill the individual. No Israeli soldiers were injured, however. The Palestinian Health Ministry identified the victim as 19-year-old Hassam Ahmed Jamil Musa, saying he was shot during the raid and later handed over to Palestinian medical teams, already deceased. Local officials in Askar said the raid occurred around midnight, and violence in the West Bank has escalated sharply since the outbreak of the Gaza war in October 2023. According to Palestinian authorities, more than 1,006 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank by Israeli forces or settlers since the conflict began, while according to Israeli officials, 43 Israelis, including soldiers, have been killed in attacks during that same period. Okay, now joining us is Gedaliah Blum, a Middle East affairs expert, joining us live from Eli in Israel. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. What more can you tell us about this violence that, of course, is ongoing in the West Bank? I do have to correct our figure. 1,500 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October 2023. How does Israel justify this enormous disparity in fatalities in the Palestinian territory?
I mean, first and foremost, when you're fighting against jihad, you don't take a score. This isn't some sort of level playing field. In fact, you have the army, you have law enforcement who are going after threats against not only civilians, Jewish civilians, Israeli civilians, but also Palestinian Authority civilians as well. And I'll tell you what most people don't understand, and what I want to share with you and your viewers, is that much of the intelligence that Israeli authorities get when they go on these raids, when they go on these arrests, come directly from the intelligence services of the Palestinian Authority. And the reason is because the Palestinian Authority within their controlled region is also fighting a war against Hamas. They fought against Hamas and lost in Gaza after the elections in early 2006, after Israel left. Once Israel left, the Palestinian Authority officials were thrown off rooftops by Hamas. Hamas has a stronghold and is very popular within Judea and Samaria under the Palestinian Authority. And the only reason why Mahmoud Abbas is still in power after he's dealing with he's in his I think he's in his 19th year of his 4-year term. The only reason why he's still in power is because of these nighttime raids, which are quashing the Hamas operatives on the ground that would pose a threat to his power in of itself. So when it comes down to any kind of scorecard, I don't believe there is a scorecard. I believe that the only thing that we should be looking at is Hamas growing, or are they being held back within Judea and Samaria and creating another terrorist state just like they did in Gaza?
Gedaliah, what we do know about this individual who was killed last night, identified as a 19-year-old Hassan Ahmed Jamil Musa. He was shot during the raid and handed over to Palestinian medical teams, already deceased. Of course, no Israeli soldiers were also killed or injured in this confrontation. Does this point to any sort of excessive force going on or not?
No, absolutely. I mean, I don't understand the question. If somebody comes and is engaged in an armed robbery, and police come and shoot dead the other man with a gun who's a clear and present danger, because the police weren't killed either, that means there was a disproportionate. No, absolutely not. Okay. You're dealing with a society that raises children not on to be a doctor, not to see their heroes as basketball players, but as martyrs, as shaheeds. So a 19-year-old who's growing through his whole childhood and grows up. 19 is still a kid as far as I'm concerned, even though they are obviously considered an adult. But to be able to die trying to kill or successfully killing Jews, for them is a very high honor. In fact, the Palestinian Authority will most likely put his family on a monthly stipend for his participation in the quote-unquote resistance. So this is not something about disproportionality.
No.
This is something that this kid most likely knew he was going to die by trying to throw a bomb at trained military force.
Gedaliah, of course, since October 2023, violence has been escalating in the West Bank from both sides. Of course, the Israeli army and also, of course, Israeli settlers that critics say are empowered. What are your thoughts on this and the perception which it gives on the world stage about the state of Israel?
All right, my thoughts on this is, making some sort of, equation with violence between both sides. I'll tell you this right now.
Okay.
You could watch Israeli army soldiers walk through an Arab village within Judea and Samaria under the Palestinian Authority, and you see the civilians walk around like everything is normal. They're going shopping, they're walking their kids to school, and they don't even bother with the soldiers. Why? Because the soldiers are not targeting them. They have no fear of the soldiers because they understand the soldiers are there in order to go after those who are being violent. Now, on the other hand, if an Arab was walking through with a weapon through a Jewish community, you would find that they wouldn't be walking normally, walking their kids. They would be running home. They would be finding safety and then calling the army or police in order to report what this person is. There is absolutely no equation between violence between those who are seeking to harm civilians and other people and those who are trying to protect civilians by targeting those who wish harm on others.
Gedaliah, do stay with us. We have further updates coming out of the region next up. With the United Nations Security Council preparing to vote on a US-backed resolution endorsing President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire proposal, Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar is making his position clear. Saar says Israel will not allow the creation of what he calls a Palestinian terror state near its major population centres, stressing that such an entity would pose a direct security threat. The proposed resolution supports Trump's comprehensive ceasefire plan, which outlines a roadmap for stabilising Gaza after the conflict. Under the plan, Gaza would be handed over to an international stabilisation force with governance managed by an apolitical Palestinian administration. Oversight would come from a newly formed board of peace chaired by Trump himself. The Security Council is expected to debate and vote on the ceasefire tomorrow, a decision that could shape the next phase of the region's political and security landscape. Gedaliah joins us once again. Israel's Foreign Minister, Gideon Saar, of course, says Israel will not allow what he calls a Palestinian terror state, but the United Nations resolution explicitly proposes an apolitical, internationally supervised administration in Gaza. Why does Israel reject even an internationally monitored Palestinian governing structure?
Well, number one is that the Trump administration right now is finding it very difficult to put together a coalition, because one of the requirements before anything is done is to disarm and to remove Hamas from power. Now, what they are finding is easy to find. Indonesia is looking to bring in 20,000 troops, but those troops aren't going to be mandated in disarming Hamas. They're going to be involved in overseeing the health and the construction of Gaza. So what we're dealing with right now is that Hamas is actually have a stronghold in Gaza beyond the yellow line, and they are not going to disarm. In fact, they're doing the exact opposite. So there's no UN mandate that is going to disarm and create peace within Gaza. So it's nice to have these headlines to talk about an apolitical leadership in Gaza. But until somebody's willing to step up and disarm Hamas, these are all fairy tales. And Israel cannot deal or gamble with taking chances on the international community's fairy tales when they don't have any real skin in the game.
Gedaliah, just briefly, we're running out of time. Of course, when Donald Trump announced this ceasefire deal, it was applauded not just throughout the world, but of course in Israel as well. Seeing how the first stage has worked in practice, what are your hopes for the second phase moving forward?
I mean, the first phase was great, where we got all the 20 hostages who are alive home. Thank God. We also are getting most of the deceased hostages home. I believe there's still 3 more. The next stage is right away. It is about disarming Hamas, and I don't think that's going to happen. But I do see the reconstruction within the yellow line that is under control of Israel. It is a bit controversial. I know that Israeli officials are saying that they don't want to see any reconstruction until Hamas disarms. But there is something to say about reconstruction within the yellow line, which Hamas does not control, to be able to highlight the contrast between what it's like to have a land not in control with Hamas that's being rebuilt, and a land that is not being rebuilt under Hamas. And I think that could really lead to some significant political pressure on Hamas to lay down his arms and to remove power from its own people, who could see right over the fence, over the yellow line, that life is going to continue, life is going to be better without Hamas.
Yes, Gedaliah, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Israel this time. And the Israeli High Court of Justice has annulled Justice Minister Yavi Levin's decision to appoint state ombudsman for judges Asher Kula to oversee the criminal investigation into the Sadeh Teeman video link affair. The court ruled that Kula could not legally take on the role due to explicit restrictions in the law that prevents the ombudsman from performing any other function or holding any additional position. However, the court affirmed that Levin does have the authority to appoint an external supervisor for the investigation, citing what it described as highly irregular and extreme circumstances surrounding the case. Liberal watchdog groups had argued that Levin's intervention risked undermining democratic norms that keep politicians away from criminal investigations. The controversy stems from the revelation that former military advocate General Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi admitted authorizing last year's leak of a video allegedly showing the abuse of a Palestinian detainee at the Sdei Timan facility. She later misled investigators while leading the effort to identify the leaker. Levin argued that Attorney General Gali Barahav Mira faced a conflict of interest, prompting his attempt to appoint Kula. The court has now clarified that any future appointment must comply fully with existing laws and its rulings. Gedaliah Bloom joins us once again. From within Israel, Gedaliah, what more can you tell us about this ongoing situation, which is, of course, echoing particularly around social media?
So, I mean, I'll tell you this. Number one, just a disclaimer, I'm not privy to the inner workings of the legal system here. I will tell you, though, from far what the situation is. Historically, the institution of the judicial system here in Israel has been political. Unlike in, let's say, the United States, where they say liberty is blind, there's a blindfold on Lady Liberty. Not so much here. They are politicized here, and generally speaking, they lean to the left. And so what you're finding is this progression of Israeli society shifting more to the right. They're realizing that they're not being represented well within the judicial system, and you're finding also within these institutions that it's being leveraged against the political leaders, and it's being weaponized. So this is actually one of the really breakthrough moments that Israeli society is seeing in real terms, that the weaponization of this institution against our political figures. And so when it comes to the idea of Levin addressing this issue, there's not much hope or trust to be able to have somebody within the institution itself to be able to judge and to prosecute itself. So that's why I think that it was really pushed that he wanted to take somebody from the outside, which was completely unprecedented, so much so that it's not even within the law. So I think that we have to find some way within the law to do this by still being objective and by looking at this case in an objective perspective and really getting to the bottom of it, because overall the people on the ground do see this institution as part of a deep state, unfortunately.
Gedaliah Blum, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to get your insight. We now move on and over to the United States for our next story. And a public rift has erupted between President Donald Trump and one of his strongest Republican allies, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, just days before the House votes on whether to release the Epstein files. Trump attacked Greene on social media, calling her wacky and a traitor, accusing her of constant complaining and claiming she turned against him after he discouraged her from running for higher office. Greene, however, says Trump is trying to pressure Republicans, including her, not to vote in favor of the releasing of the Epstein files. She has recently criticized Trump over policy decisions, his handling of the Epstein documents, and what she sees as a retreat from America First positions. Despite their formerly close relationship, Greene is one of only 4 Republicans supporting the discharge petition to force a vote on releasing the documents. Analysts doubt the feud will damage Trump's political support, but the House is expected to vote on the bill as early as the 18th of November. Joining us now is Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert and she joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you very much for joining us here on News X World. A crisis in MAGA-land, as they're calling it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Donald Trump's most vocal supporters, formally now seemingly voting against his wishes in order to release these highly contentious files. Do you see his loss in support for her making any difference to how Republicans will be thinking?
Well, okay, these are Epstein file, and I think, in my opinion, Marjorie Taylor Greene are two different conversations. Let's first go to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, she has hitched her wagon to Matt Gaetz, who was at once a Trump nominee, whose nomination he had taken for Attorney General. He had had to take back under pressure because the House Committee of Ethics report found him guilty of indulging in a party in sexual activity for which he paid for, of which one was a minor, 17-year-old at that time. So though he has used every weapon on in his arsenal to kind of suppress the report, block its release, question the entire narration of the event, and it has been a back and forth. According to Matt Gaetz, the woman that has accused him, who was a minor at the time, he has he said that he's never met her, never slept with her, and that is why she does not file the lawsuit against him, though she keeps making tall claims. So in the context of this particular incident, Marjorie Taylor Greene has hitched her wagon on Matt Gaetz, and she wants him to be nominated. He wants him there, and this is where now the linkage between the Epstein file and Marjorie comes through. She has told the Republicans very clearly that if you want to go after Matt Gaetz, then every single one of those dirty secrets, their skeletons in the closets, the hush money paid out of her words, that paid out of government tax funds, will be revealed, and of which one is the Epstein file, according to her. So this is the link between Marjorie and Trump's Epstein problem. Unfortunately for America, Epstein has become a horse that Republicans whip, and then the Democrats whip, and then the Republicans whip, and the Democrats whip. Both, I believe, are very, very complicit, very, very guilty of what has been happening at the Epstein's mansion and in all the transactions that he facilitated. Trump used the misery of minor girls to stoke up emotional sentiments in his MAGA groups, promised a full release, full conviction against people who were involved in such a crime, but he didn't act on it. When he actually got it, Pam Bondi and the others kind of put a wet blanket on it, partial releases, and then only very specific Democratic aligned allegations have come through. So Trump's problem with Marjorie has deeper issues, and Epstein's just the beginning of it.
Yes, Shruti Dasgupta, it's a fascinating situation coming out of the United States. Thank you for bringing your insight to it. Pleasure to have you on the programme as always. We now move on, and the National Ombudsman Office said 7 minors were killed this week in Colombian military airstrikes targeting an alleged drug-running armed group in the southern Amazon. Ombudsman Iris Marine reported that teenagers, 4 girls and 3 boys, were victims of forced recruitment and died in an operation ordered by President Gustavo Petro, who faces strong US pressure to confront drug trafficking. The military said the November the 10th airstrikes killed 19 members of an ex-FARC splinter group and led to the rescue of 3 minors. A separate strike in Araucua province killed 9 suspected guerrillas. Petro defended the operation, saying the action prevented an ambush on Colombian soldiers. He has launched a large-scale manhunt for rebel leader Ivan Mordisco, comparing him to Pablo Escobar. Authorities are also investigating whether another rebel commander, Antonio Medina, was killed in the strikes. The operations come as Petro faces US sanctions and domestic criticism for his earlier strategy of negotiating with cocaine-producing groups instead of confronting them militarily, raising political stakes ahead of next year's elections.
As
Fuerzas militares desarrollaron una operación en el Guaviare en contra de las disidencias de Iván Mordisco, en la cual se confirmó el fallecimiento de 6 menores de edad, entre muchas otras personas que murieron, así como hay otros 4 cuerpos recuperados que no se han ido.
Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.